Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where things were looking up, everything seemed to be on the right track,
Mm-hmm.
and then almost out of nowhere, the ground just kind of shifts beneath your feet?
Happens all the time, especially in sports.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's precisely the, well, fascinating and frankly pretty brutal scenario we're diving into today. We're focusing on a player who maybe a year ago you wouldn't have thought this, but now seems like an obvious trade candidate for the Jacksonville Jaguars heading into 2025 training camp.
Right.
Our mission, like always, is to pull out the key insights from the sources you've shared, help you understand why this surprising and, yeah, kind of unfortunate shift is happening for this player.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is just how quickly dynamics can flip in the NFL. It's high stakes, you know.
Totally.
1 minute, a player looks like a core piece, maybe a future cornerstone, right? And the next, well, they're being talked about as prime trade bait. It's complex, pro sports careers. They hinge on so much more than just raw talent or how they started out. We're about to dig into a pretty significant and, yeah, a pretty swift turn in one player's journey that really shows this perfectly.
Yeah, and for many of us, Travis Etienne Jr., he just burst onto the scene in Jacksonville, didn't he? Looked like a future superstar.
Oh, yeah. Coming out of Clemson with Lawrence.
The anticipation was huge. He had that speed, that elusiveness. He could catch the ball. Seemed like the total package.
Right.
Yet, our sources are indicating that, well, just 3 seasons in, he's facing maybe his toughest stretch, a real crossroads.
It is.
And it's kind of poignant because he's still on his rookie deal, you know, that valuable, cheap contract.
Yeah, the team control aspect.
But he turned 26 back in January, which makes him, and this is kind of surprising, the oldest guy in that Jaguars backfield now.
Yeah, that's a point people miss. Time moves fast.
So the big question is, what exactly happened? Why this kind of dramatic shift?
Well, the core issue, and it's pretty clear when you look at the data we've got, it's a really significant decline, both in his production, like the raw numbers, and maybe more importantly, his efficiency.
Okay.
If we break down those numbers, his total rushing yards and his yards per carry, they've actually dropped every single year since his rookie season.
Every year.
Every year. And by 2024, those numbers hit, well, an all-time career low for him.
Wow.
Think about it. 2022, he rushes for, 1,125 yards. Great year, breakout season, looked like a premier back.
Yeah, established himself.
Exactly. Then 2023, he still gets over 1,000 yards, but, and this is the kicker, it came on what our source called a putrid 3.8 yards per carry.
Oof, 3.8.
Yeah. Now, he did manage a career-high 11 touchdowns that year, which, kind of masks some of the underlying efficiency problems.
Right. Touchdowns look good on the stat sheet.
They always do. But the warning signs, they were kind of there if you looked closely at that yards per attempt number.
Okay. Putrid is definitely a strong word. It really hammers home that efficiency issue you mentioned, even with the scores. But, I mean, if he was scoring, doesn't that still count for something? Is 3.8 yards per carry really that bad for a starting back these days?
It absolutely is, especially for a guy like Etienne, known for that explosiveness. Right?
Yeah.
For context, back in 2023, the league average for running backs was floating around 4.2 yards per carry. So 3.8, it's significantly below average.
Okay, quite a gap.
Yeah, it means he wasn't consistently moving the chains, not breaking off those big runs you expect from him. It often meant, short gains, sometimes negative plays, stuff that puts the offense in bad down and distance spots.
Right, stalls drives.
Exactly. And the difference got even more stark in 2024. He only missed 2 games, so you can't just blame it on injuries.
Good point.
But he only got 150 carries. Just think, that's over 100 fewer carries than he had in 2023.
That's a massive drop-off in usage.
Huge. And this much smaller workload led to an even worse 3.7 yards per attempt and only 558 rushing yards for the whole season. Career low.
Wow.
And what's really telling, what points to this big shift in team philosophy and maybe even trust, is this was the first time in his career he wasn't the Jaguars' leading rusher.
Who was?
Tank Bigsby, the guy a lot of people saw as just a backup, a complementary piece.
Yeah.
He actually had 18 more carries and 208 more rushing yards than Etienne.
That is. Yeah, that's a profound change for a former first-round pick.
It really is.
So you can really see how quickly things can slide, even for a guy who, just a year or two ago seemed locked in as the lead back.
Huh.
But it's not just about his individual numbers in a vacuum, is it? There's this bigger picture, this shifting landscape within the Jags organization itself that seems to be playing a big role here, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you connect the dots, Etienne's situation, it's as much about a team kind of finding its way, being in flux, as it is about his own output. The Jaguars are clearly moving into what the sources are calling a new era, heading into this 2025 offseason. And the biggest change, no doubt, is the coaching shakeup.
Peterson out.
Doug Peterson, yeah, he had some success, but ultimately fired, replaced by Liam Cohen, who's known as this offensive mind.
Okay.
And Cohen's arrival, it already sent ripples through that running back room. He comes in with this reputation for dynamic, sometimes run-heavy schemes that really value efficiency, versatility,
Right.
often using multiple backs.
That's a very different philosophy than maybe Peterson had.
Exactly, a significant shift.
So that's a huge factor.
Yeah.
A new OC, new schemes, new preferences, a fresh pair of eyes looking at everybody. What kind of immediate impact did Cohen's arrival have on Etienne's actual playing time?
Oh, it was immediate and drastic, which tells you a lot about Cohen's vision, right?
Yeah.
So in 2023, Etienne commanded, I think it was a 73% offensive snap share, huge number, on the field for almost 3/4 of the plays.
Wow, okay.
In 2024, under Cohen. That plummeted to just 47%.
47.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost cut in half.
Massive reduction in opportunity. Meanwhile, Tank Bigsby, his playing time went from just 12% as a rookie up to 34% in 2024.
So you could see the writing on the wall even then.
Pretty much. Two lead backs clearly trending in opposite directions under the new system. But then things changed even more this past offseason when Cohen really got to, shape the roster. Soon after Cohen was hired, the Jags went out and drafted two rookie running backs, Paishul Tootin and LaQuint Allen Jr.
Ah, new blood. Okay. And I'm hearing Paishul Tootin especially comes in with some buzz and maybe a skill set that fits what Cohen wants.
He certainly does. Now, Allen, he's a 7th-round pick, probably, on the roster bubble, maybe a project.
Right.
But Tootin comes in with a decent amount of hype for a late-round guy, and maybe more importantly, like you said, a specific scheme fit. He's 22, made a name for himself quick at Virginia Tech's second-team All-ACC both years, put up over 2,000 rushing yards, 25 TDs.
Pretty productive.
Very. Our source calls him an explosive athlete with top-end speed. And here's the key phrase they used. Arguably the best fit in Cohen's offense out of all 4 running backs now on that roster.
Best fit. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it implies Cohen's system probably really values that quick burst, hitting the hole fast, maybe getting to the edge, breaking off big plays. And that seems to be Tootin's game.
So it's not just about talent anymore. It's about how you fit the specific puzzle Cohen's building.
Precisely. Scheme fit becomes paramount, and Tootin seems to embody that for Cohen.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because with all these changes, new coach, new rookies, our source says the Jags backfield is shaping up to be this 3-headed monster.
Mm-hmm.
My first thought is, how do you even manage that? Especially when you still have a guy like Etienne who, yeah, when he's healthy, he's been the starter, he's still got talent. What does that look like? And what's it mean for the guy who used to be the main man?
That's exactly the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads us right into the why. Why Etienne is the obvious trade candidate now, even if, talent-wise, he isn't necessarily the, quote, weakest link.
Right.
The harsh reality, I guess, in the NFL is that sometimes teams trade good players not because they're washed, but because they represent the best chance to get something back. Future assets.
Okay.
For the Jaguars, the thinking seems to be that Etienne is the most expendable with value in the trade market.
Ah, okay. So they have Bigsby, they have Tootin who fits the system, they have Allen.
Right. Those other guys offer either, a lower cost, maybe a better scheme fit like Tootin, or just more years of team control.
So it's a cold, hard business decision. Asset management, getting value for an asset before that value potentially drops off a cliff, even if the asset is still a pretty good player.
Exactly that. It's like selling a stock. Not because it's worthless, but maybe you think it's peaked or it's about to dip, so you cash in while you can still get a decent return.
Makes sense from a team perspective, however tough for the player.
Yeah. The goal for Jacksonville would be to, quote, maximize his waning value before training camp really gets going. They want to avoid that scenario where maybe his production dips further in camp or Bigsby and Tootin really pop and suddenly Etienne's trade value just evaporates.
Right, strike while the iron's, well, maybe not hot, but still warm.
Exactly. And despite the recent struggles, our source suggests Etienne still has quality years ahead of him. He's still only 26, not a ton of carries overall compared to some backs.
Yeah.
He's shown elite flashes.
True.
So teams needing a veteran presence or maybe just a different flavor in their backfield, they'd likely be willing to relinquish quality assets, as the source puts it, to get him on that expiring contract.
What kind of assets are we talking, realistically?
Probably looking at like a mid-round pick,
Mm.
maybe a third, possibly a fourth rounder, which for a team like the Jags trying to build around Lawrence in this new system, that's actually pretty valuable capital.
Yeah, another bite at the apple in the draft.
It's a calculated gamble, basically. Get something back for a player who, while talented, just might not fit the long-term vision or, the immediate needs under Cohen.
It really is a tough business, making moves that aren't always about who's bad, but who makes the most strategic sense to move on from. But okay, if the Jags do pull the trigger and Etienne gets that change of scenery, where could he land? What teams might be thinking, yeah, he could help us?
Yeah, and that change of scenery, it's often exactly what a player in this spot needs, right? A fresh start, new system, chance to reestablish
For
himself.
sure.
Our source points to a few specific teams that might be kicking the tires. First ones mentioned are the New England Patriots and the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, interesting pair.
Both teams are noted as needing some backfield reinforcements. Now you might think, wait, didn't they just add running backs?
Yeah, both teams made moves in the offseason.
They did, but the sources suggest that even with those additions, these teams might still be enticed to further moves if their current group doesn't quite gel or progress the way they hope in training camp.
So like an insurance policy?
Kind of. Look at the Pats' total rebuild mode, right? A proven guy like Etienne, even on a one-year deal, could offer stability. For the Cowboys, they're always in win-now mode, seems like. If their current backs, maybe younger guys, aren't looking great by August, Etienne is a clear, low-risk upgrade available.
So these teams are basically watching their own situations closely, and Etienne could be plan B if plan A falters.
Yeah.
Smart contingency planning, I guess?
Exactly, being opportunistic. And then there's another, maybe more compelling option, almost like a storybook thing for Etienne, the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, his hometown team.
Yep, his hometown team adds that little emotional angle. And their situation's interesting, too. Alvin Kamara obviously still leads that group, elite pass catcher. But Kondre Miller, the guy they drafted to be his complement, as apparently largely underwhelmed, hasn't really provided that consistent, tough running they need alongside Kamara.
Right, Kamar does his thing, but they need someone else too.
And here's that kind of infamous stat, especially for fantasy players. Kamara has never reached 1,000 rushing yards in a single season.
Still crazy to think about, given how good he is.
Isn't it? But that fact alone means there are a lot of touches up for grabs in that Saints backfield, touches that Miller maybe isn't seizing.
So Etienne could step right into a significant role there.
Potentially, yeah. It could be a perfect fit. He could handle a good chunk of the Russian workload, let Kamara keep doing his elite receiving work. Gives the Saints a really dynamic 1-2 punch. He could be the grinder, Kamara the versatile weapon.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For Etienne, then, that change of scenery could be exactly what his career needs right now. Our source even suggests it might be the best course of action for his career, calling him kind of an unfortunate victim of the Jaguars' regime change.
Sings that way.
What an insightful and, yeah, sometimes kind of brutal look at how complex team dynamics and careers are in the NFL.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up our deep dive here, Travis Etienne Jr. has gone from looking like a franchise cornerstone to, well, an obvious trade candidate for the Jags. And
Yeah.
it's not just about his performance tipping. That's part of it.
Right. It's multifaceted.
It's this complex mix, isn't it? His declining efficiency, the rise of other backs like Bigsby, the new rookies like Tootin who seem to fit the new system better, and just the big strategic shifts under Liam Cohen. It's really a prime example of how fast a player's standing can change. Affected by his own play, sure, but also by these bigger team strategies.
Absolutely. And this whole situation, it really brings up an interesting question, I think, for you listening to consider maybe in your own line of work or, high-stakes environments. In any dynamic, competitive field, how much does individual performance really dictate someone's future versus, the shifting strategy or the priorities of the organization itself? Like, when is getting a change of scenery truly the best thing for someone to thrive again? And when is it maybe just kicking the can down the road?
That's a fantastic question, and a deeply relevant one, I think. Lots to chew on there. Well, we hope this deep dive is giving you a bit of a shortcut to getting up to speed on this really intriguing NFL situation. Until next time, keep digging for those insights.